Coming up this evening on NTD Business. President Biden slapping sanctions on Russia. Germany also halting a major pipeline after Russian President Vladimir Putin sent troops into eastern Ukraine. Former President Trump's new social media app is getting so popular, you're going to have to wait to get in. Now, shares of the company behind the new app are soaring. And Beijing approves 3 new coal mines valued at $4 billion. But experts agree China won't be able to meet its pledge of being carbon neutral by 2060. That and much more coming up on NTD Business. Great to have you with us. Paul Graney here live from New York City. President Biden today announcing a series of sanctions against Russia for what he called the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Here's the president.
We're implementing full blocking sanctions on 2 large Russian financial institutions, VEB and their military bank. We're implementing comprehensive sanctions on Russia's sovereign debt. That means we've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West and cannot trade in its new debt on our markets or European markets either.
A day earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered troops to go into 2 regions in eastern Ukraine. That was after he and the area's separatist leaders announced the regions were now independent from Ukraine. Western powers condemned the move and began to slap sanctions on certain Russian individuals. Germany announced it would halt plans for the Nord Stream 2, that's a key natural gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. More on that in just a moment. At home, Biden is facing bipartisan pressure to take more extensive actions against Russia following Putin's decision. However, recent polls showed that a majority of Americans believe that sending troops to Ukraine is, quote, a bad idea. A slim minority believe it's a good one. As we mentioned, Germany is refusing to certify a pipeline built to bring natural gas to Europe from Russia. Here's the German Chancellor.
I have asked the German Economy Ministry today to withdraw the report on the analysis of energy supply guarantees from German regulator. It sounds technical, but it's the required procedure so that there can be no certification of the pipeline now. Without this certification, Nord Stream 2 can't become operational.
The 750-mile pipeline was completed in September, but still needs final certification from German regulators before it can get up and running. Several countries have been against the pipeline since it was announced in 2015. The United States has long argued Nord Stream 2 poses security risks by making Europe more dependent on Russian gas. Germany's economy minister said Germany's gas supply would be secure even without Nord Stream 2, but he also told reporters that gas prices are likely to rise further in the short term. So what is the Nord Stream 2 pipeline? What does it do? And what does it mean for Europe and the United States? NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
Nord Stream 2 is an undersea natural gas pipeline that connects Russia with Germany. Construction began in 2018 and was completed by late last year. It's expected to transport close to 4 trillion cubic feet of gas to the European Union per year. That's twice as much gas compared to an earlier undersea pipeline called Nord Stream 1. It's also significant because it bypasses older land pipelines that go through Ukraine and Poland, a NATO ally. Europe needs the pipeline because they haven't been producing as much gas domestically, and there's a growing need for affordable natural gas, which is cleaner than other fossil fuels. Europe currently imports roughly 35% of its natural gas from Russia without Nord Stream 2. Behind the project is Russian state-owned gas giant Gazprom. The company's profits support the Russian government budget. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel approved the deal with Russia, but then President Trump has been against it for making Europe more reliant on Russian energy. Ukraine and Poland are also against the deal. They feared that the pipeline would give Russia geopolitical leverage over Europe. Back in 2019, construction of the pipeline was suspended when Trump sanctioned the project's investors. It didn't resume until President Biden took office. Last July, the Biden administration signed a deal with Germany, allowing the pipeline to be completed. In return, Germany agreed to take action against Russia if Russia ever uses gas as a weapon or attacks Ukraine. But in Congress, both Republicans and Democrats have been against Nord Stream 2 for a long time. Analysts say Russia is unlikely to cut off gas supplies to Europe in retaliation because Russian gas giants and the European market are interdependent. Europe is now trying to diversify its gas supplies. Allison Lee, NTD News.
And oil prices inching closer to $100 a barrel today. Brent gained 1%, right now over $96 a barrel. WTI also up 1%. Stocks, though, ended lower. Investors may be on edge over developments in Ukraine. The Dow fell 483 points, 1.4%. S&P 500 lost 44 points, also about 1%. And the Nasdaq lost 167 points, about 1.2% today. In a bid to fight inflation, JP Morgan is predicting the Fed will raise interest rates 9 times over the next year. That'll likely mean higher repayments on your credit card debt, mortgage debt if you're on a variable rate, and possibly any other debt you may have. But it's not just you personally. Your state and local government will also likely face higher borrowing costs. So are your services at risk? Local authorities fund themselves through tax revenue and other income, but they also borrow from investors. Investors can buy municipal bonds, which pay a yield every year until they mature and the investor gets their money back. But that yield is an expense for the municipality. And as the Fed raises rates, the financial burden for state and local governments will likely rise too. So joining us to discuss is Jonathan Williams, Chief Economist with the American Legislative Exchange Council. Jonathan, great to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Great to be back on with you, Paul.
Jonathan, in your assessment, are rising rates a threat to state and local governments?
Well, right. I think they certainly are when you look at the municipal debt market. Certainly lots of different competing areas for investors to go right now. And with rising interest rates, that's always traditionally a threat to local debt, for instance. However, there's a lot of advantages still that local governments have. And I think it also needs to be pointed out, Paul, that, while rising interest rates and inflation certainly have a downside for state and local governments, it compares nothing to the downside they have for taxpayers across the country. We, of course, have their take-home pay continue to be eroded by this raging inflation and big government monetary and fiscal policy that we're seeing here in Washington. But the state of municipal finance, while this is a challenge, remains strong. I mean, right now, state and local governments are awash in cash. For probably in my 15 years career following this, Paul, this is the best that state and local government finances has looked. So certainly the default risk is down when it comes to local municipal governments and bonds that they've issued. And also just a new story today in the Wall Street Journal talking about record home values and assessments. And of course, that means higher property tax collections yet again coming to local governments across the country. So there's a lot of work to be done here. But the thing, of course, that we worry about the most is America's forgotten interest, special interest group, the taxpayers of America, who are taking it on the chin right now between the calls for tax increases here in Washington and then, of course, the hidden tax of inflation that is eroding people's spending power.
But that's a good point because, of course, prices go up, you got increased sales tax, wages go up, even they're going up far slower than inflation per government data. We also have house prices going up, as you alluded to, with higher property taxes. But like you mentioned, the taxpayer is kind of on the hook for these things. I think a lot of people aren't seeing their wages grow at all. Do you feel that there will be a breaking point where people will start to call for tax breaks rather than increased taxes?
Well, certainly that's the case. I mean, while Washington is mired in this discussion over to raise taxes or not to raise taxes, and of course we've seen gridlock, which sometimes can be a good thing to stop big bad ideas like some of the big government ideas talked about right now in Congress. While we're talking about that here in Washington, though, the states are completely leading the way when it comes to the discussion around pro-growth and pro-taxpayer tax reductions and real tax relief, whether it's Mississippi, whose House of Representatives just voted overwhelmingly to repeal the state's personal income tax over the next 10 years, or states across the country looking to become more competitive and cut income and sales and property taxes. something that many of our ALEC members across the country are looking at, this issue of rising home values and rising assessments, and looking at ways to get at this issue of rising property tax burdens through things like our truth in taxation approach to property tax reform. So while Washington once again is stuck in this discussion and gridlock around tax increases, the good news, Paul, is that states are absolutely leading the way, and they're working very hard to cut people's real tax burdens and give real relief.
Jonathan Williams, American Legislative Exchange Council. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Always great to join you.
Female soccer players and the U.S. Soccer Federation have reached a $24 million equal pay settlement. For around 6 years, the players argued that they are unfairly paid less than their male counterparts. NTD's Faye Quarter has more.
A big victory for 61 female soccer players. A group from the U.S. women's national team and the U.S. Soccer Federation have reached a $24 million settlement, ending a legal fight that began in 2019.
This settlement pertains to the issue of back pay. The women were claiming that they were owed as much as $66 million in back pay. Of course, the settlement of $24 million is a very significant amount.
Rishi Sehgal is a partner at Romano Law. Sehgal says the two sides seem happy with that amount. The battle began 6 years ago when 5-star players accused U.S. Soccer of gender wage discrimination. U.S. Soccer immediately responded that men earn more because they bring in more money, but their stance brought public backlash.
Women's soccer pales in comparison in terms of its popularity to men's soccer, and that's the reason economists say they traditionally have not been as well paid.
Matthew Vadum is a courts reporter for the Epoch Times. Vadum says the market should decide the amount of pay. It's unclear exactly how big the revenue gap is, but FIFA estimates over 1 billion people watched the 2019 Women's World Cup, while 3.5 billion watched the 2018 men's tournament.
Even if they make more money, you can't just throw all the revenue at the men's soccer team.
Ron Zambrano is the employment chair at West Coast Employment Lawyers. Zambrano says the revenue should be distributed more evenly. Diana Patton is a former civil rights attorney. Patton says the settlement will have a wide impact.
This is going to transcend not just U.S. soccer, it is going to transcend into other sports, basketball, golf, you name it.
And the deal isn't final. It only takes effect when the U.S. women's team and U.S. soccer agree to a new collective bargaining agreement. The current bargaining agreement expires on March 31st. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
And Beijing's top planning agency approved 3 different coal mining projects yesterday, valued at nearly $4 billion total. But the move comes despite China pledging to peak CO2 emissions before 2030 and reach carbon neutrality before 2060. NTD's Don Ma reports.
Academics and analysts agree that China won't meet its carbon emissions pledge.
No, I think those goals are all just made-up numbers meant to appease the larger international community.
In 2020, they put 3 times as much coal power online as the rest of the world did.
China's National Development and Reform Commission gave the go-ahead for 2 mines in Shanxi province and 1 in Inner Mongolia.
Unless they can come up with some kind of amazing technology to remove carbon from the atmosphere, they won't be carbon neutral as long as they're still mining new coal.
Coal is still the most efficient way for them to generate electricity. It's hugely important to their economy.
One Chinese official said coal accounts for 57% of China's energy generation in 2020.
The Chinese government actually threatened coal producers with investigations if they weren't having output at full capacity to provide electricity. This is going on.
The president of the International Strategic Studies Association and author of the book The New Total War of the 21st Century explains what would happen if China reduced reliance on coal.
But you'd also have a massive reduction in the number of lives because people would die, particularly in winters, if you can't get enough energy to power homes and the like.
Coal is one of the least expensive ways to produce electricity in China. But if China stopped using it, electricity prices would go up, and that would affect its manufacturing sector.
If they were to go carbon neutral, their enormous manufacturing sector would shut down. because they could not afford the same electricity rates that they currently pay, which means they would raise the price of goods, which means American markets would go elsewhere, right? The reason they moved to China is because it's cheap.
Last year, China announced 43 new coal power plants. If approved and built, they will emit an estimated 165 million tons of CO2 a year.
A large coal fuel power plant. Really, they have a useful life that goes more than 50 years for some of these things. So it wouldn't be until 2072, which is long beyond their claim.
Most of the countries that are really committing to net zero are all, democratic countries. You don't see a lot of authoritarian economies that are really committed to net zero. So.
The bottom line is they're going to keep using as much coal as they can get.
China's newly approved mines will produce close to 20 million tons of coal a year. Don Ma, NTD News.
And former President Trump's brand new social media app is reigning supreme on the iPhone App Store. Named Truth Social, it's currently the most downloaded app for social networking, beating out even Facebook, WhatsApp, and Telegram. Shares of the blank check company behind Truth Social were up over 10% today, after 1.5 billion people viewed the app yesterday, only one day after its release. Reportedly, there are over 400,000 people still in the app's waitlist because the app is getting more traffic than it can handle. And the world's largest music company is diving right into NFTs. So could this revolutionize the industry, or will it flop? NTD's Phil Zhou has a story.
Universal Music Group, the largest music company in the world, is entering the metaverse.
Artists are getting an opportunity to make direct relationships and sell more money than they've probably ever made.
There's a big push in the music industry at the moment saying, let's all get into NFTs.
I think it's a great idea because artists have their audience and the NFT give them a new opportunity to sell something.
UMG is partnering with an NFT platform to release non-fungible tokens and collections for its artists.
There is really little red tape between the transaction of a fan buying and investing in artists. So for an emerging artist, this is an opportunity to take a much larger piece of the pie.
But not everyone is an NFT believer.
Cannot think of a single use case for NFTs that you can't do without them. They say NFTs can be used as concert tickets. Like, have any of these people been to a show in the last 5 years?
Arguing we already use cryptography and QR codes for concert tickets.
It's very hyped. It's been hyped in the last year, and everybody who sort of tries to present it to you, they go like, this is the solution to all your problems.
Independent musician Calvin West says NFTs cannot help musicians solve bigger issues.
They don't offer any kind of discoverability for an artist, and I think that's the biggest obstacle for small artists is to reach new listeners, and NFTs just don't do that.
West says NFTs may work out for the big artists, but he says it's not worth it for smaller and independent artists like himself. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
Quick break, but still to come. AT&T is shutting down its 3G network today. We have what that means for you and your devices. And a history buff makes purple dye using an ancient technique, and one of the ingredients might surprise you. That and much more coming up on NTD Business.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, CEO of MyPillow. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried to cancel myself and MyPillow. Well, during these times, your support has meant everything to us. So my employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. We're selling the best products ever for the best prices ever. For example, we have my standard size MyPillow, regularly $69.98, now only $19.98 with your promo code. Or you can get custom fit with my premium queen size MyPillows, regularly $79.98, now just $29.98. Or my king size regular $89.98, now just $34.98. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to receive this exclusive offer. If you do it right now, I'm going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
The 2022 NTD 8th International Chinese Vocal Competition will be held at the Merkin Hall of Kaufman Music Center in New York City. The competition is honored to have specially invited vocalists with the world-renowned Shen Yun Performing Arts to serve on its panel of judges. The gold award is $10,000. The 2022 8th International Chinese Vocal Competition. For more information, please visit vocal.ntdtv.com.
Welcome back. AT&T's 3G network is shutting down today. Other carriers are following suit later this year. And it won't just impact older phones, but everyday devices you probably own. It's because a range of products require updates to continue working. That includes some home alarm systems, medical devices like detectors, and in-car crash notification and roadside assistance systems like OnStar. If left unaddressed, the stakes could be high in certain cases, like vehicle systems not being able to contact first responders after a crash. So to avoid a disruption of service, businesses are urging customers to upgrade or replace some products and services before they drop connectivity. And astronomers are showing the world a view of space we have never seen before, a view that includes a recent disturbance on the sun. NASA says this is an unprecedented image of a giant solar eruption. It took place last Tuesday, stretched millions of miles into space. NASA and its European Space Agency's Solar Orbiter spacecraft captured the photo. The ESA said it is the largest solar prominence ever observed in a single image that includes the entire sun. Solar prominence happens when a sun ejects a huge explosion of light, solar material, and energy out into space. In this particular eruption, the flare traveled away from the Earth. For a few weeks, beekeepers rent out truckloads of honeybees to farmers to pollinate crops. But due to beehive thefts, beekeepers are turning to technology to protect their precious colonies. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
The past few weeks, more than 300 hives were reported stolen in the San Joaquin Valley. Loot that's worth tens of thousands of dollars.
Sadly, people have gotten more into theft because the business and the industry has grown so much, and people think they can make a quick, easy buck by stealing hives and putting them into pollination.
Close to 400 more vanished from a field in Mendocino County, prompting the state's Beekeeper Association to offer a $10,000 reward. A few days later, authorities recovered the boxes of bees 20 miles away. One suspect was arrested.
Sadly, beekeepers are the only people stealing bees from other beekeepers. You have to have specialized equipment. It's not something that's a random act. It's very calculated.
So some beekeepers are starting to equip hive boxes with GPS-enabled sensors. Others are tagging their boxes with clear liquid only visible under UV light.
It's very difficult for professional beekeepers like us to keep our hives alive, and it's become increasingly difficult, which makes the theft even more catastrophic to our industry. I mean, it takes us over a year to build a healthy hive, and so when it's stolen from us, it's not something we can easily replace.
The supply of bees has been dropping, and the cost to rent a hive of the essential pollinators has soared, jumping from about $40 per hive 2 decades ago to as much as $230 per hive this year, likely motivators for the thefts. The insects are essential for pollinating food crops and keeping agriculture healthy. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And one history enthusiast is making dye from sea snails. He's inspired by a school project he did decades ago on ancient Carthage and by the purple coloring that represented wealth in the classical world. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
Mohammed Ghassan Nouira processes murex snails using techniques first developed by the Phoenicians to produce a dye known as Tyrian purple that sells online for about $2,500 a gram. The color was so expensive that the ancient Romans restricted its use to the elite, whose purple-fringed robes became the mark of the Mediterranean's most powerful dynasty.
Our ancestors used to extract dye from the murex snail this way. They break the shell of the snail and then extract the gland. After that, they leave it to ferment in salt for 3 days, then put it in a tin container, add other substances, and leave it on the fire between 7 and 8 days until the dye dissolves in the water. They then try to dye wool or silk to evaluate the color. If they get the desired color, it's good. If not, they leave it on the fire until they get the color they want.
For the ancient Phoenicians, the trade in Tyrian purple helped build a mercantile empire that established new colonies across the Mediterranean, such as Carthage. Many years after his school project, Nouira noticed a dead murex on the beach. Recalling his history classes, he decided to experiment with ways of making the dye.
This hobby started when I was 14 years old, in history class, studying the economy of the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, and the Carthaginians, and how they were famous for extracting purple dye from the murex. It was more expensive than gold. The idea stayed in my mind for 12 years, and in 2007, I found a dead murex on the beach in Carthage, with this purple color coming out of it. From that time on, I started my adventure in reviving this dye.
Nouira spent 14 years working on how to produce the dye from nets of murex he buys from a local fisherman. At first, people criticized his new hobby, complaining about the time and energy he devoted to it. But as he started to get results, people saw he was onto something. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Never give up. As the latest business updates for today, you can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, though, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.